For decades, the name Marley has been treated by the global public as something akin to sacred ground, a musical and spiritual lineage requiring fierce protection. Damian Marley inherited this heavy mantle at a very tender age, forced to navigate its immense privileges alongside its suffocating constraints as he grew up. He defended the name in recording studios, built extensively upon its foundations through groundbreaking musical fusions, and at several points in his career, fought tirelessly to escape its overwhelming shadow. Recently, however, a series of deeply personal revelations forced him to speak out with an unprecedented level of candor and vulnerability, shocking the reggae community. A highly publicized DNA dispute did not merely reopen historical wounds within the fractured Marley family estate. It actively pushed Damian to make a definitive structural decision that stunned even his closest lifelong supporters. When he finally broke his silence to address the mounting controversy, his underlying message to the public and his peers was remarkably clear. Some relational ties are simply not meant to survive the stark light of objective truth, especially when exploitation threatens the core integrity of a father's enduring global message. This modern conflict forced Damian to reflect on his unique childhood, which was spent growing up precisely halfway between two drastically different socioeconomic and cultural worlds in Jamaica. Damian Marley was merely a toddler when his father, Bob Marley, succumbed to cancer in 1981, leaving behind an artistic legend that felt larger than life itself. This untimely passing left a massive family structure that was already deeply complicated by various maternal lineages, conflicting financial interests, and intense international scrutiny. Damian did not grow up with fond personal memories of his father's voice filling the hallways of his home, nor did he receive private, intimate lessons about life, spirituality, and music from the reggae prophet. Instead, he inherited a vast collection of second-hand stories, studio recordings, and a legendary surname that carried an almost unbearable weight for a young child. He was raised primarily in the affluent area of Stony Hill by his mother, Cindy Breakspear, a former Miss World whose striking beauty had once dominated headlines across Jamaica and the United Kingdom. Because of this uptown upbringing, Damian's early childhood looked absolutely nothing like the harsh, impoverished reality of Trench Town, the inner-city slum that fundamentally shaped Bob Marley's early years and revolutionary worldview. His mother's house was highly secure, the surrounding neighborhood was incredibly wealthy, and his daily childhood routines were meticulously structured by a family determined to see him succeed academically and socially. His stepfather, Tom Tavers Finson, was a highly respected Jamaican criminal lawyer and a prominent political figure, a sophisticated man entirely comfortable moving within elite courtrooms and high-level government circles. On the surface, this environment provided Damian with immense stability, high-quality education, and protection from the harsher realities of post-colonial Jamaican poverty. Underneath that comfortable surface, however, lived a profound and constant cultural contradiction that the young boy had to internalize daily. Damian has since openly reflected on what it truly meant to grow up as the only brown-skinned child in a predominantly white, upper-class Jamaican household. His stepfather and his maternal siblings moved through high society with an ease that lacked the heavy racial assumptions and political projections that constantly followed Damian wherever he went. He could instinctively feel the stark difference in how society perceived him versus his immediate household, even if no one in his family openly pointed out the racial dynamics. At school, sports events, and social gatherings, people knew exactly who he was from the moment his name was called, the son of the great Bob Marley. That instant public recognition came with an intense sense of cultural pride, but it also carried an immense, unspoken expectation from the Jamaican public. His biological father's iconic music spoke passionately about total black liberation, strict Rastafarian identity, Pan-African solidarity, and fierce, unyielding resistance against Babylon, a term Bob used to criticize oppressive political systems. Yet, paradoxically, the highly influential man raising Damian on a daily basis operated successfully and powerfully inside those very legal and political systems of Babylon. It created a silent, lingering tension that deeply shaped how Damian viewed societal power, class privilege, and artistic authenticity from a very young age. Because of these complex dynamics, he did not immediately rush toward a career in the music industry like his older siblings had done. As a perceptive teenager, Damian actually imagined a stable future in the field of architecture, a professional path built entirely on physical structure, mathematics, and independent design rather than rhythm, performance, and the public spotlight. He watched from a distance as his older half-brothers, especially Ziggy and Stephen Marley, carried the family musical banner through their Grammy-winning group, the Melody Makers. He saw firsthand how relentless media comparison and public critique followed them everywhere they performed, measuring their talent against an impossible, mythic standard. The Marley name could instantly open the heaviest doors in international recording studios, but Damian quickly realized it could also trap an aspiring young artist inside someone else's permanent historical shadow. Damian understood with absolute clarity that if he ultimately chose the path of music, he would never simply be judged as Damian, the individual artist. He would always be viewed through the lens of being Bob's son, an extension of a prehistoric reggae monument rather than an independent creator. When he finally turned his full attention toward music in his late teens, the transition was incredibly deliberate, calculated, and deeply spiritual. He formally adopted Rastafarian beliefs after finishing his formal schooling, choosing the faith not out of childhood indoctrination or family pressure, but out of a deeply personal adult conviction. Through his critically acclaimed early albums like Halfway Tree, he fearlessly explored what it truly meant to stand uncomfortably between two starkly contrasting worlds. He analyzed the uptown comfort of his mother's wealthy lifestyle alongside the raw, downtown struggle that his father had passionately sung about in the ghettos of Kingston. The title of that specific album reflected that lifelong duality, symbolizing a historic landmark in Kingston that geographically and socially sits directly between differing economic realities. That structural metaphor perfectly mirrored his own complex upbringing, serving as a creative bridge between his maternal privilege and his paternal revolutionary expectations. The deeper he moved into the competitive realms of reggae and dancehall, blending them seamlessly with gritty American hip-hop influences, the more he realized a painful truth. He discovered that a family legacy is not a piece of solid, unyielding ground upon which an artist can simply rest their laurels. Instead, it is a highly contested, fiercely protected, and sometimes bitterly attacked piece of cultural and financial property that requires constant vigilance. Growing up halfway between these disparate worlds gave Damian a unique, panoramic perspective on Jamaican society, but it also left him in a position of constantly proving his authenticity. He felt the need to prove that he belonged in the rugged dancehall spaces of downtown Kingston just as much as he belonged in the quiet, manicured boardrooms of uptown wealth. As his musical career began to flourish internationally, the broader Marley family structure was undergoing a series of intense legal and emotional transformations behind closed doors. After Bob Marley died intestate in 1981, the beautiful global image of a unified, spiritually bonded family began to crack under the massive weight of legal reality. While millions of devastated fans around the world mourned a prophet of peace, unity, and highly paid corporate lawyers were quietly preparing mountains of court documents. Estates were being meticulously examined, international royalty streams were being audited, and various bloodlines were being fiercely questioned by executors. Courts in Jamaica and abroad ultimately recognized 11 children as Bob Marley's legal heirs, a massive number that inherently complicated any sense of centralized family governance. Out of those 11 recognized heirs, only 3 were Rita Marley's biological children from her marriage to Bob, namely Cedella, Ziggy, and Stephen. The remaining 8 children were born to several different women in different cities across the globe, under vastly different social, economic, and emotional circumstances. In the vibrant cultural landscape of Jamaica, the traditional concept of baby mothers and baby fathers was not considered shocking or socially unacceptable to the masses. It was widely accepted as a standard part of working-class social life, historical family structures, and the complex realities of male-female relationships. Rita Marley herself had long understood and accommodated the fact that Bob did not live his life within conventional, Western marital boundaries or monogamous constraints. Even during the height of their marriage, his various external romantic relationships and children were openly known to the immediate family circle and close associates. What fundamentally changed everything, transforming a cultural norm into a bitter legal battlefield, was his sudden death without a valid will. When Bob was alive, he possessed the personal authority and financial liquidity to choose exactly who to acknowledge, who to financially support, and who to physically bring into his home. After he was gone, those highly personal choices were instantly transformed into cold, adversarial court matters where emotion was entirely replaced by legal standing. At that critical juncture, traditional Jamaican culture gave way entirely to rigid corporate documentation, and familial love was replaced by cold, hard paperwork managed by estate administrators. Cindy Breakspear, Damian's mother, had already endured years of intense public criticism and intense tabloid scrutiny during Bob's actual lifetime from various factions. She was frequently labeled by critics as an uptown, light-skinned, highly privileged outsider whose presence in Bob's life supposedly compromised his revolutionary message. Some cultural purists argued fiercely that her high-profile relationship with Bob directly contradicted his musical message of black struggle, systemic resistance, and authentic roots Rasta identity. Rita Marley reportedly referred to her in highly charged racial and social terms that reflected the deeper, historical tensions rooted within Jamaica's complex color and class hierarchies. The underlying conflict between Rita and Cindy was rarely allowed to become explosive in public view, but it constantly lingered as a toxic undercurrent within the broader family dynamic. This tension became particularly acute when Damian was born, instantly becoming a legally recognized part of the official Marley bloodline and estate inheritance. Then came a woman named Yvette, who came forward with a claim that her young daughter, Maikda, was also Bob's biological child, conceived shortly before his health completely collapsed. At first, the primitive blood tests available in the early 1980s were entirely inconclusive, leading to a prolonged period of intense legal skepticism and emotional gridlock. Rita Marley initially refused to sign the necessary legal documents recognizing this specific paternity claim, viewing it with deep suspicion amidst a wave of opportunistic demands. The painful issue dragged on in the courts for years, complicated by intense family grief, corporate infighting, and a general atmosphere of pervasive distrust. Bob's mother, Cedella Booker, eventually decided to step in personally, signing the formal recognition papers for the absolute sake of the child's well-being and future security. Years later, after extensive legal maneuvering and mediation, Maikda was formally and permanently added as a legal heir to the massive financial estate of Bob Marley. That formal recognition brought significant, lifelong financial implications for all parties involved and naturally reopened old emotional wounds that had barely begun to heal. Maikda would later receive a substantial trust fund from the estate, but she also struggled immensely through her turbulent adulthood, facing various legal troubles and public embarrassments. She eventually managed to rebuild her life away from the tabloids, but she did so entirely under the permanent shadow of a legendary surname she did not actively choose. For a young Damian, childhood unfolded directly alongside these constant, exhausting legal disputes over lineage, money, and historical authenticity. He watched the revered Marley name travel routinely from the grand festival concert stages of the world straight into the sterile environment of corporate courtrooms. He saw firsthand how personal identity could be clinically argued by lawyers, how sacred paternity could be tested via medical samples, and how strategic silence could be weaponized. He understood very early in his development that being a Marley was not just about inheriting musical rhythm. It was fundamentally about providing undeniable legal proof. That complex history shaped his psychological outlook deeply, making him incredibly protective of his family's inner circle and highly skeptical of outside opportunists. Every single new claim brought forward by another potential child of Bob Marley carried far more than mere tabloid gossip or passing public amusement. It carried immense financial stakes, severe emotional consequences for the living siblings, and the permanent possibility of further internal family division and legal fragmentation. Therefore, when a man named Fabian publicly and aggressively insisted for years that he was Bob's oldest son, it struck a highly sensitive nerve. Fabian's absolute refusal for a long duration to take a legitimate accredited DNA test was not simply treated as another harmless internet rumor by the family. For Damian, it echoed every single exhausting legal battle, emotional betrayal, and public circus that he had grown up witnessing throughout his formative years. For nearly a decade, this individual calling himself Fabian Marley insisted to media outlets worldwide that he was an authentic part of the reggae bloodline. He performed musical sets under the name, gave extensive video interviews under the name, and explicitly positioned himself as a leader of the extended musical family. To casual international observers and undiscerning reggae fans, his artistic claim sounded highly plausible given Bob's well-documented history of fathering children with multiple women. Bob had openly acknowledged multiple children during his lifetime, and several others had been formally recognized by the Jamaican courts after his tragic passing in Miami. The Marley family had already successfully navigated incredibly complex paternity disputes before, creating a public perception that almost anything was possible regarding Bob's lineage. Fabian's bold public claim slipped easily into that dangerous gray area where internet rumor and historical possibility often overlap to create a false narrative. The family's official response to Fabian's public assertions was entirely consistent and unyielding from the very beginning of his media campaign. They stated clearly and repeatedly to journalists that he was absolutely not related to Bob Marley in any capacity, biologically or socially. They described him as a calculated imposter, attempting to illegally attach himself to a highly lucrative global brand built over decades of hard labor. Still, Fabian managed to avoid taking an accredited, legally binding forensic DNA test for a remarkably long time, using various media distractions to stall the process. As long as there was no official laboratory result published to disprove him, his lucrative speculation and concert bookings could easily survive on public curiosity. YouTube interviews circulated widely online, social media groups were formed to support his cause, and naive fans fiercely defended his supposed right to the legacy. Conversely, industry critics and family insiders dismissed him entirely as a fraud, but the longer the public uncertainty lasted, the more damage it did. The ongoing spectacle slowly chipped away at the Marley family's absolute control over their own historical narrative and the commercial value of their trademarks. That dynamic changed permanently when Fabian finally submitted to strict testing at a fully accredited, independent forensic laboratory located in the state of Illinois. The scientific director overseeing the high-security genetic testing process eventually issued a statement that left absolutely no room for further public debate or speculation. The definitive genetic results showed, with near absolute scientific certainty, that Fabian was completely unrelated to Rohan Marley, Stephen Marley, or Robert Marley. The calculated probability that he was actually the biological son of a man named Othniel Stanford was determined by the lab to be virtually 100%. The data was not ambiguous. It was not subject to mathematical error. And it was entirely closed to any creative legal interpretation by Fabian's team. It was absolute, definitive, and final, effectively ending a multi-year campaign of identity theft and cultural co-optation in a single afternoon. The Marley family immediately issued formal public statements expressing a profound sense of relief that the long-standing fraud had finally been exposed by science. They rightly emphasized that they had maintained all along, based on internal knowledge, that this individual was not part of their father's biological bloodline. Part 2. The corporate entity known as 56 Hope Road Music, which strictly protects Bob Marley's international trademarks, image rights, and intellectual property, released a detailed statement. They emphasized that protecting the global legacy of the late reggae icon required absolute historical clarity, legal truth, and rigorous policing of unauthorized commercial entities. In their calculated corporate view, pursuing this genetic truth was never about publicly humiliating an older Jamaican man who desired a music career. It was entirely about safeguarding the structural integrity of a family name that carries immense economic value, deep cultural relevance, and irreplaceable historical weight. But inside the actual family circle, away from the sterile language of corporate press releases, the emotional toll of the ordeal had heavily accumulated. For Damian, this specific modern episode felt fundamentally different from the earlier, vintage paternity disputes that had defined his childhood in the 80s. He had grown up watching crowded courtrooms determine personal identity, seeing how children were transformed into financial beneficiaries based on signatures on legal documents. He had seen how false rumors and modern digital myths could linger indefinitely in the public consciousness, even after official legal recognition had been granted. The Fabian case aggressively reopened those exact same childhood wounds, forcing Damian to confront the dark side of his father's immense global fame and promiscuous history. When the undeniable DNA results finally became public knowledge, Damian's public posture and internal attitude toward the family brand shifted in a very noticeable way. For several years, he had stood proudly on major festival stages with his brothers during the highly successful Marley Brothers Legacy Tour celebrations. He had shared the microphone in a tight, rotating performance pattern, singing iconic anthems like Exodus, Three Little Birds, and One Love as a unified collective. That powerful stage image projected an unshakable front of total family harmony, spiritual alignment, and shared musical purpose to millions of adoring fans worldwide. Yet privately, the repeated modern challenges to their father's sacred legacy and the constant commercial parasitism had created deep psychological fatigue among the siblings. This time, the cold hard facts of genetic science left absolutely no room for emotional negotiation, polite compromise, or continued public tolerance of falsehoods. For Damian, that sudden scientific clarity demanded immediate, decisive personal action rather than another passive corporate statement from their legal team in Kingston. The thin line between authentic family legacy and cynical commercial exploitation could simply no longer be allowed to blur for the sake of public relations. The major decision to permanently distance himself from anyone misusing or dilute the Marley name was not an impulsive, emotional reaction to a singular event. It was the direct result of decades spent watching how incredibly fragile personal identity becomes when it is constantly questioned by the public. This internal philosophical shift within Damian became even more apparent to industry insiders when the highly anticipated Hollywood biopic, Bob Marley, One Love, reached theaters. The big-budget feature film was heavily framed by its studio and marketing teams as the ultimate cinematic tribute to family legacy, resilience, and global unity. Ziggy Marley and Cedella Marley were directly and intensely involved in every single stage of the film's complex production process from script to screen. They served as the primary, authoritative voices in shaping exactly how their father's highly sensitive personal and political story would be told to modern audiences. The film opened incredibly strongly at the global box office, drawing massive, record-breaking audiences during its highly publicized debut window across North America and Europe. It quickly transformed into a major commercial success, solidifying the brand's enduring relevance in 21st century popular culture and introducing Bob to a new generation. Many casual fans praised the film as an emotional, highly accessible introduction to Bob's complex life, his spiritual journey, and his timeless musical message. However, established film critics offered highly mixed reviews regarding the project's overall narrative depth, historical accuracy, and safe creative choices regarding Jamaican politics. On the polished surface of the entertainment industry, it looked like a moment of absolute, historic celebration for the entire extended Marley family. Yet amidst all the glitz, glamour, and red carpet photos from London to Kingston, one incredibly glaring absence stood out to seasoned music journalists: Damian Marley did not appear at the high-profile world premiere in Jamaica, nor did he attend any of the international promotional screenings abroad. He did not post a single promotional message, trailer, or celebratory note across any of his massive, highly active social media platforms. He completely refrained from publicly celebrating or even acknowledging the film's release in the precise manner that fans and studio executives fully expected. In a famous family that had spent decades presenting itself as an unbreakable, unified front on stage and in media campaigns, such silence speaks loudly. Within days of the film's release, intense speculation and wild rumors began to circulate rapidly through the reggae community and online forums. People wondered if there was severe, irreparable tension building behind the closed doors of the family's private estates in Jamaica and Miami. They questioned whether creative decisions about how to portray Bob's various affairs and children had caused a deep, bitter disagreement among the heirs. Or was Damian intentionally stepping back from the commercialized version of his father's life to protect his own hard-won artistic integrity and peace? Ziggy Marley felt compelled to address these growing rumors directly during his extensive promotional interviews with major American television networks and music magazines. He insisted to reporters that he spoke with all of his brothers every single day and that their family did not operate through drama. He explained calmly that Damian simply had other intense studio commitments, and his absence from the red carpets should never be interpreted as division. His media tone was perfectly calm, measured, and calculated to protect the film's ongoing box office momentum and the family's public image. But in the fast-moving world of modern media, the exact timing of Damian's total public silence mattered immensely to cultural analysts. The exhausting DNA scandal involving the imposter Fabian had only just been legally resolved, and the Marley name had once again been pulled through dirt. For many astute observers of Jamaican music culture, the distinct overlap of these major events felt far more than merely coincidental or scheduling-related. From Damian's deeply analytical point of view, the entire situation surrounding his father's commodified legacy was incredibly layered, complex, and emotionally fraught. He had already spent decades of his independent adult life building a highly distinct, universally respected artistic identity within and far beyond roots reggae. His masterpiece album Halfway Tree had explicitly examined his unique, uncomfortable position between social classes and competing cultures within urban Jamaica. That record had openly and fearlessly addressed his mixed racial background, his uptown privilege, and the expectations of his father's worldwide fan base. Years later, his monumental album Welcome to Jamrock had directly confronted severe political corruption, structural poverty, and street violence in Kingston's darkest ghettos. That singular project earned him immense critical acclaim worldwide, widespread respect across the hip-hop community, and multiple prestigious mainstream Grammy Awards. His brilliant, full-length collaboration with American hip-hop icon Nuz on the album Distant Relatives had expanded his musical conversation toward global African identity. That project blended raw reggae rhythms with complex hip-hop lyricism in a sophisticated way that very few artists had ever attempted at that level. He had also stepped confidently into international, multi-genre territory through high-profile projects like the supergroup Superheavy, alongside rock legend Mick Jagger. He had formed highly lucrative, creatively fulfilling partnerships with major electronic, pop, and rap artists completely outside the traditional, insular roots reggae world. In other words, Damian Marley did not need a heavily commercialized Hollywood biopic to confirm to the world that he belonged to the story. His exceptional, boundary-pushing musical career had already proven his undeniable status as a true, innovative torchbearer of the family's creative spirit. After the definitive DNA revelations finally clarified who did, and did not actually carry the biological bloodline, he seemed far less interested in symbols. He appeared completely weary of participating in manufactured displays of family unity, designed primarily to boost corporate box office receipts or streaming algorithms. He was far more focused on protecting his personal artistic credibility and ensuring that the family name was never associated with exploitation. Public appearances on red carpets can easily signal total harmony to the public, but they can also conveniently blur unresolved internal tensions. By remaining completely silent during the film's massive global promotional wave, Damian appeared to be drawing a very subtle, unyielding personal boundary. He did not actively attack the cinematic project in the press, nor did he offer any public criticism of his beloved siblings' choices. He simply, quietly, and completely chose the path of emotional distance, allowing his absence to send a powerful message to those paying attention. And in a famous family where history has repeatedly and violently collided with sensationalized global headlines, that quiet distance spoke volumes to insiders. When Damian finally addressed the broader theme of legacy and boundaries in subsequent interviews, he did not shout or display outward anger to reporters. He did not hurl specific accusations at external individuals or engage in petty, public recriminations regarding the estate's ongoing legal management strategies. Instead, he spoke profoundly about the nature of absolute truth, explaining how a historic legacy cannot possibly survive if it becomes a free-for-all. He emphasized with great solemnity that DNA does not just serve to confirm biological bloodlines. It fundamentally establishes an immense, lifelong ethical responsibility. Behind his carefully chosen words lay decades of watching children fight bitterly for legal recognition and vulnerable women fight for societal acknowledgement. He had watched countless bold outsiders attempt to desperately attach themselves to a legendary surname that carried immense global power and financial reward. He had lived his entire conscious life, answering endless, repetitive questions about a famous father he barely had the chance to know personally. Every single media interview he had conducted since his teenage years brought predictable questions about Bob's ghost, about unfair artistic comparisons, and skepticism. Reporters constantly probed to see whether he was really like his father spiritually, or if he was merely capitalizing on an incredible inheritance. The exhausting Fabian imposter case reminded him perfectly of how incredibly fragile an artist's identity can become when it is built on rumor. So, after decades of patience, he finally drew a hard, permanent line in the sand regarding his public associations and personal brand. He consciously and completely distanced himself from anyone attempting to cynically exploit or cheapen the Marley name without providing absolute genetic proof. He redirected his intense focus entirely toward his own independent musical work, his own solo international tour, and his extensive studio production efforts. He returned wholeheartedly to the foundational cultural message that had shaped his early career, achieving true human unity through absolute truth, not denial. Part 3. The underlying historical irony of this entire modern family saga is deeply painful and intensely visible to anyone who studies reggae music history. Bob Marley famously sang to the entire world about one love, universal peace, total harmony, and the spiritual gathering of all human tribes. Yet his highly complex, unscripted personal life created deep internal divisions, severe legal fragmentations, and emotional alienations that still echo decades after his death. Damian Marley understands this profound human contradiction far better than almost anyone else alive today, because he literally grew up inside its belly. He matured as a man and an international artist directly inside the swirling vortex of this massive, multi-million-dollar global legacy machine. And now, after the definitive forensic DNA results finally forced absolute clarity upon the public, he chose to protect what truly remains of it. He decided that safeguarding the spiritual and artistic credibility of the name was worth the discomfort of stepping away from certain family projects. This courageous stance by Damian has sparked an incredibly vibrant, deeply nuanced debate among roots reggae purists, cultural historians, and music industry executives worldwide. Many ardent supporters argue passionately that Damian did the absolute right thing by establishing a hard, unyielding boundary after the DNA results were published. They believe that a global brand of this immense cultural magnitude requires rigorous protection against the endless waves of modern digital opportunists and frauds. In their view, if the family does not police its own borders with absolute scientific precision, the revolutionary message of Bob Marley risks dilution. They applaud Damian for prioritizing artistic substance, genetic truth, and personal peace over the commercial demands of Hollywood movie studios and corporate marketers. They see his quiet withdrawal from the film's promotional circus as a powerful act of defiance that honors his father's true spirit. To these fans, true loyalty to a legacy means defending its core authenticity, even if it requires creating temporary distance from family. Conversely, another faction of traditional roots, reggae fans and cultural commentators, express a sense of deep disappointment regarding the apparent family rift. This group strongly believes that the foundational concept of family solidarity should always take absolute precedence over public controversy, legal disputes, or scandals. They argue that Bob Marley's overarching message of universal unity and one love should be practiced most intensely within his own immediate household. From their perspective, presenting a completely united front to the world, especially during a historic cinematic moment, was vital for the culture. They feel that Damian's total public silence and physical absence from the high-profile premieres inadvertently fueled damaging tabloid gossip and speculation. To these observers, true family strength is about openly absorbing the complex flaws of history while continuing to stand proudly together on stage. They believe that by drawing such a sharp, public line, Damian may have unintentionally contributed to the very division he seeks to avoid. This complex situation raises profound questions about the true nature of modern celebrity lineage, the burdens of inheritance, and the price of fame. How does the child of a global icon build an authentic life when their very name belongs to the entire world's imagination? For Damian, the answer has clearly arrived through a commitment to personal truth, artistic independence, and the setting of rigorous personal boundaries. He has shown that he refuses to be a passive passenger in a corporate legacy machine, choosing instead to dictate his own terms. His journey demonstrates that honoring a parent's memory does not require sacrificing one's own sense of reality, balance, and personal ethics. As he moves forward with his upcoming musical projects and international festival appearances, the public will undoubtedly continue to watch closely. His independent path serves as a compelling blueprint for how the next generation of a legendary dynasty can successfully navigate fame. Ultimately, the story of Damian Marley and the battle over his family's name reminds us that legacy is never truly settled or complete. It is a living, breathing, constantly evolving entity that must be actively defined and defended by each successive generation that carries it. The recent genetic revelations and subsequent film controversies have merely served as the catalyst for a long-overdue restructuring of priorities. By choosing the path of absolute clarity, scientific truth, and emotional distance where necessary, Damian has taken complete control of his destiny. He has proven that he is not merely the passive recipient of an iconic surname, but a fierce protector of its soul. Whether one agrees with his specific methods or laments the apparent lack of total family unity, his integrity remains completely undeniable. He continues to stand as a monumental figure in modern Jamaican music, perfectly balanced between the lessons of the past and the truth. In the grand theater of global music history, very few families have ever had to endure the intense level of scrutiny faced by the Marleys. Every single personal relationship, financial transaction, and artistic endeavor they undertake is instantly analyzed by millions of critics and fans. For Damian to carve out a spaces of absolute personal autonomy within this intense environment is a remarkable psychological and creative achievement. He has consistently refused to allow his artistic voice to be bought, sold, or packaged in a way that feels cheap. His strategic silence during major corporate marketing campaigns is a luxury earned through decades of delivering undeniable, Grammy-winning musical excellence. It is a quiet reminder to the entire entertainment industry that some things remain far more important than box office metrics. For Damian, the pursuit of spiritual authenticity, historical accuracy, and personal peace will always outweigh the temporary rewards of public relations. As the global reggae community reflects deeply on the profound lessons of the Fabian DNA scandal, Damian's actions take on deeper meaning. He has effectively signaled to the world that the Marley name can no longer be used as a convenient vehicle for opportunism. This definitive stance provides a necessary shield for the family's future generations, ensuring that their lineage remains untainted by digital myth. It sets a powerful modern precedent for how legendary estate properties should be managed in an era dominated by internet misinformation. Damian's commitment to genetic and historical truth acts as a vital course correction for an estate that was drifting toward commercialization. By anchoring the family name to undeniable reality, he has preserved its revolutionary power for decades to come, honoring his roots. His father's music was fundamentally about tearing down illusions, exposing lies, and demanding absolute spiritual and political truth from those in power. In that specific regard, Damian's modern actions are perhaps the most authentic tribute to Bob Marley's true, uncompromised legacy imaginable. By refusing to participate in a sanitized, corporate version of family unity that ignored underlying realities, he embodied his father's spirit. He chose the difficult, narrow path of personal integrity over the wide, lucrative highway of easy, unquestioned commercial compliance. This choice resonates deeply with the core principles of the Rastafarian faith, which prioritizes truth and rights over worldly wealth. As he returns to the quiet sanctuary of his recording studio, his position in the world of music is stronger. He has shown the world that he is entirely capable of standing alone, defined by his own words and actions. The heavy mantle of the Marley name remains securely on his shoulders, but it is no longer an exhausting burden. It has become a refined instrument of truth, wielded by an artist who understands its immense power and its severe limitations. The global audience will continue to debate the merits of his choices, but Damian appears entirely at peace with his direction. He has navigated the treacherous waters between uptown privilege and downtown authenticity to emerge as an entirely self-determined, independent cultural force. His life story continues to inspire those who face the daunting task of defining themselves in the shadow of giants. In the end, Damian Marley has proven that the truest way to honor a legendary father is to live authentically. He has drawn his lines, spoken his truth, and left an indelible mark on the history of Jamaican music culture. The legacy is safe, not because it is hidden away, but because it is defended by those who love truth. The ongoing evolution of the reggae genre requires voices that are completely unafraid to challenge prevailing narratives and establish difficult boundaries. Damian has consistently filled that vital role, acting as a crucial bridge between traditional foundations and modern, urban realities. His willingness to confront internal family complexities publicly demonstrates a level of courage that is exceedingly rare in pop culture. He has elevated the conversation around celebrity estates from mere financial management to a higher level of ethical responsibility. As modern media continues to blur the lines between reality and entertainment, his grounded approach offers a refreshing sense of clarity. He reminds us all that a true name is something that must be earned through consistent action, dignity, and respect. His enduring artistic legacy will ultimately be judged not by his compliance with expectations, but by his adherence to principle. The profound impact of his musical catalog, from his early roots experiments to his modern international collaborations, speaks completely for itself. He has successfully expanded the boundaries of what reggae music can achieve on the global stage while remaining anchored in truth. His independent spirit ensures that his father's revolutionary message remains vibrant, contested, and deeply alive rather than an artifact. As the dust finally settles on the recent DNA controversies, Damian Marley stands taller than ever as a symbol of integrity. He has successfully defended his name, built an incredible independent empire upon its foundations, and transcended its heavy historical limitations. His journey remains a powerful testament to the enduring human capacity to find one's own voice within a loud world. The truth has fully emerged, the boundaries have been clearly drawn, and the future of the legacy remains secure.